Hey everyone, welcome back. Notorious here, and on today's video we are going to continue with the DIY theme. We're switching it up a little bit. Got this in the background. If you had seen my Instagram post a little while ago, you would have seen this crusty, rusty 302 short block. It's been sitting for 4+ years, 2 years that I know of, in a drive shed with nothing on top of it. I think later it might have got a piece of cardboard maybe, but it was already crusty and rusty in the lifter valley and tops of the cylinders before that. And 2 years before that, I believe it was sitting in the corner of a garage, just on a floor. So it's been hanging out for a while. It's from the previous owner who I originally got it off of, said to have been believed to be in 1988. So I'm going to dig into this, tear it down, and the intention on this is a DIY how to build yourself a, well, we're going to start with a short block, but then we're going to continue on, do heads, intakes, refresh everything. So how to build yourself a full 302. First, I've got to get this all stripped down, do some measuring, see if we need any machining, see how bad the rust and pitting is in certain areas, and that'll determine which direction we're going to go with this. I'm hoping that I can get a 302 engine rebuild kit, stock bearing sizes, reuse stock size rings, and just do more of a refresh and cleanup with you guys. We're gonna go step by step here, but for today I gotta get this thing unwrapped. I don't even know if it's got oil in it, to be honest. Make sure it spins over. We'll take a look at some things up the top end before we actually start tearing into it, but let's get this thing unwrapped and see how nasty it is inside. Yeah! So as I mentioned previously, my goal today is to get this thing torn down, measured up, and get some parts ordered. As most of you would know, parts are hard to come by these days, so might need a little bit of lead time. This may end up being a drawn out project, but we're going to start it now, see how far ahead we can get. I'd like to at least get this torn down and measured up today if I can. Over the last week or so, my left shoulder's really been bugging me, so I'm not sure if I'll get all the way through this. Haven't really slept a whole lot the past week, so we'll see how that behaves and see how this comes apart. It is a bottom end. Everything is smaller. We got some mains, bolts, and stuff like that, but should be able to at least get them apart. Got power tools. Don't always need to use hand tools. So we'll get this unwrapped, get into it, and I haven't seen it in a while, so we'll see how crusty it is. Ooh, yeah. That is tasty. Well, we don't need that anymore. There's a lot of debris, junk, nastiness in there. Still got head gaskets. I'm gonna say they're no good anymore though. I'll get you guys in a little closer here and you can see what we're working with. Alright, so here's a bit of a closer look. Oh yeah, we've got well, maybe it's out outside at some point. Who knows? Those lifters are crusty. All that junk in there. Yeah, should be a good time. So this is better than it used to be. You saw a lot of the rust back in this corner here. This has actually been soaking in deep creep for a while to try and reduce the amount of flaky rust there. It looks like it's done a pretty good job. That's just what you get. Things sitting and high moisture content. It's old. What do? We're going to try and save it, see what happens. If not, well, it'd be a good learning experience. You guys can see what goes through and tearing down an engine at least. Sounds like there's no oil in there. I'm going to grab a drain pan and we are just going to ensure before pulling the oil pan off that's not going to make a mess or spinning this thing over. Alright. That drain plug is more round than it is square. What do you got going on here? Well, there's nothing to make a mess, but that also means there hasn't been oil on the bottom end of this thing for potentially 4 years. So all those bearings, luckily we'll be replacing them, but all the components that are within, they might not be so clean because there hasn't been anything keeping the moisture out of this thing. There's no distributor in there too, so it's been pretty open to the elements. I guess we'll just get stuck into it, see what it looks like inside. So we got rid of a whole bunch of the leaves, greenery, organic material, mud. I did pull the front drain plug. A little trickle came out of that as well. So we'll reinstall that. But that's not overly reassuring, especially since, well, this thing's been sitting potentially uncovered and out in the open for quite a number of years. No idea what's wrong with it, why it got pulled. I do know from the looks of those drain plugs, they've got those cheesy nylon washers, so this was probably maintained at a quick lube shop, so that's great. Luckily a 302 is a pretty stout motor, but clearly this one's seen better days. So we're gonna pull the spider off, get the dog bones off, and pull these lifters out if they'll move. We got 11 or 7/16. Grab our gun here, zip these off, and you'll notice I have some nice tin trays here. Save these things when you guys are having dinner parties because they come in real handy for engine parts and disassembly. What I'm going to do too is when you're taking all this apart, try and remember where a lot of these things came from if you're going to try and reuse them and put them back in the same order. So you can just simply, we'll use the bench as the front of the engine, and then we're just going to put these in the order that we take them off, and then later if we go back to reuse, well, we probably won't be reusing these lifters, but if you were, put them back in the same spot they came out, especially if you're reusing a cam, and that way you're going to reduce chances of introducing any irregular wear. Now that I got those dog bones out, there's a whole bunch more debris underneath these lifters. However, they are spinning, so that is a good sign. I'm going to get that vacuum back in here and get the rest of it cleaned up. Alright, so we got all these cleaned out along the edge. Most of these want to actually spin in the bore for the lifters, with the exception of a couple here. We're going to try and free them up, remove them with a pair of snap ring pliers here, and see if we can get lucky. They are kind of crusty inside though, so not having the greatest luck with a couple. That one's not bad. Alright. Perfect. They actually don't look too bad. There we are. There's actually like no wear on those rollers, which is surprising, impressive, but also appreciated. I'm assuming this thing probably just got pulled because it was older, burning oil, and wasn't worth the present owner's time. I have to try and grab a pair of pliers or channel locks, rotate some of these free. We do have some junk that's gotten in the bores there. We'll try and get these out, and then we'll actually clean out the cylinder bores a bit and see if this thing will want to roll over. Alright, got all these lifters out. The one on the passenger front actually gave me some trouble. I did actually free it up before I showed you on the time lapse there, but that one I had to take a pair of channel locks to actually crack it free. There was a lot of signs of water being in that corner. So not so good, but it is what it is. We're taking it all apart for a reason anyways. So I'll wipe out these bores a bit, get a little bit of the extra junk out of them. That's nice. I'm going to see if this thing actually wants to roll over first, because that will be a lot easier to take apart if the pistons actually want to move. So grab our ratchet. Let's put it on the crank there. Whew. It actually rotates really nicely. That deep creep being in there, I think, made a big difference. I've never used it before, but my buddy Andrew, also known as A Few Fast Forwards on Instagram, it was sitting in his drive shed. We both had kind of forgot about it, and then got to the point that we're like, hey, something should be done with this before it actually seizes up or becomes unusable. So he was nice enough to throw a bit of deep creep down there, and it looks like it actually went through a lot of that rust that was sitting in the cylinders, because it didn't used to look that nice. So that's nice. Preserved it a little bit. There's still some rust and pitting in there. We'll have to see if that comes out with a hone. If not, we'll have to weigh the options between the cost of boring this over and getting oversized pistons, or if it's just not worth it, because ultimately this will just be a refresh, clean up, paint it up, and then it will actually become for sale. So we'll see where this project ends up. I'm going to get this front crank pulley off and timing cover off so we can get access to the cam, get this timing chain out, and then we will flip it over and actually pull the pan, see what's inside there, and start knocking out some of these pistons. So I got this universal puller set from Princess Auto. You can find them, I'm sure, on Amazon, Harbor Freight. Should be pretty inexpensive. This is just a cheapy set, but it does a trick for a lot of things I've worked on over the years. Steering wheels, cranks, comes with a fair amount of hardware, and you don't need an expensive one if you're not using it all the time. We're going to spray a little bit in here just so these bolts will thread in a little nicer. Perfect. Just run them in and out a couple times with the gun, clean up the threads. Perfect. Get this puller set up on here. Looks like we're only going to be able to use 2 bolts. Oh well. The rest is clean at least. So I ended up having to fiddle around a little bit with that. The threads on the end of the puller were actually too large a diameter to go through the crank bolt hole in the pulley. So I ended up putting a bolt in there and then putting the tool back on so it bottomed out on that and was able to push it back through there. A little bit of finagling, but made it work. Now we're going to get this oil pan unbolted from the front here, get this timing cover off. Hope that none of these bolts break off. There's not many left on there. There's only 1, so we should be okay. Back when I was 17, one of the first jobs I did on my Mustang was a water pump. And broke one of these long bolts right off. It probably broke like halfway back in the timing cover. Ended up putting it back together with the new pump on there, then had to pull it back apart, have the machine shop come in, extract the bolt. I would have been 16, 17 at the time, so that was a little beyond my scope back then. And even in this one, you can see like a ton of corrosion in these bolt holes. So over the years, that aluminum is just going to corrode to those bolts and then doesn't want to let go. All right, let's get this timing cover off here. Well, that wasn't stuck on there very well at all, actually. Very nice. Try and get the front of this oil pan undone. Actually, I never looked at the bottom side of this, and I just realized that almost all the oil pan bolts are missing off the oil pan rail. So, the bottom has been opened up before. I don't know what that means, if that's a good or a bad thing. It also means I need a whole set of oil pan bolts, so if anybody's got some extras, send them over. See if we can't get this timing cover cracked off. Grab a soft mallet. You stuck. Yikes. Try and find a nice spot to pry off of. Looks like in here is about the only nice one. It's not going to damage anything. But yeah, it's on there pretty good. There we go, that's the secret. It was actually really stuck on this dowel pin here. It was starting to flex the cover, but it cracked loose. Same thing on this side. Really tight on those dowels. There we go. Whoa. I say we're probably going to need a timing chain. That's rusted solid. Here's those dowels I was mentioning about that we're wanting to hang on pretty tight there. This thing's pretty. Alright, let's get this cam out. That's a good sign. It's in decent shape, it's not all locked up. We will try and pry this upper cam gear off if we can. Not too worried about saving it, because as you can see, it's pretty shot. Might just let that sit there and soak for a couple minutes. In the meantime, maybe we'll pull the pan off. Alright, let's get this thing spun around. Hope that not too much falls out. But why wouldn't it? Ah, that's not bad. A little bit of coolant. Okay, a whole bunch more. That's not nice looking at all. Tried to at least minimize the amount of mess. Oh, this side has all the oil pan bolts. Don't know. No logic. Okay, apparently I only need like half a dozen then. I'm wondering if the pan has been off or not. Oh yeah, don't forget about those rails I just talked about. There's sludge, slime, goo in there. That's appetizing. All right. That counterweight on the crank is definitely showing signs of not having rust in there, or not having oil in there, causing it to rust. What do? Get this nice one-piece oil pan gasket off. I'm not going to reuse that. It's a little on the messy side. Let's get this oil pump pickup off. Then the oil pump. And then let's see about getting some pistons out. For the amount of sludge that was in that pan, I'm impressed. The oil pan pickup has nothing in it. Although a lot of it has probably fallen out and ended up as the pan was sitting there doing nothing for however many years. It's always nice. I'm going to grab a universal just so it can go in on there and actually fit and not bind. The other one was binding a little bit on the way out. Original Ford pump. I'm assuming this has probably never been apart before. Oil pump still moves. It's a good sign. Hopefully these bearings weren't starved for oil then, and then our crank didn't get overheated. Let's try again on this timing chain. See if it wants to come free. You can get this cam gear off. Awesome. There we are. That's somehow only has a couple seized links, but we're not going to reuse that one. Crack some of these rod bolts loose, and then maybe spin this back over and actually mark these pistons so that we know where they came out of. If these are not marked already, a lot of the times the factory ones are, from what I've seen before, but I'm not too sure. No, we just got dots for forward, so we'll just put a little bit of a mark in them just so we know where they came out of, and we can reference back to that later. Brain fart, it's on the rods. The pistons are marked to go forward, but actually all along these pistons on the sides, there is a mark right here on the flat spot, and then corresponding stamping with the cap. So this one, number 1, this one, number 2, sorry, number 5, and then number 2 here. So we're good that way, and then your main caps are actually numbered as well and have an arrow forward. So we'll get these cracked loose. I could probably zip these all off with the gun, but I want to just kind of see this way. You can tell if anything's been loose or rattling around. Help with a little bit of diagnosis if there was a potential mechanical failure before the engine was removed, because nobody knows anything about this engine right now. So get these cracked loose, grab a hold of that crank bolt. Toss that back in for a minute so we can rotate this thing around and gain access to a couple of those rod caps. All the way. All right, they all seem pretty normal. Let's spin them off. Knock out some pistons. I gotta get rid of this ugly oil filter. It's driving me nuts. It's stuck on there too. Probably gonna make a mess. Oh well. Bone dry. I don't even know if that got used or if that was literally just put on. There's nothing in there. Alright, get these zipped off. Place these in order so that when I get the pistons out, I can just put them back on in the same spot they came out of. No bearing in there, stuck on the rod. There we are, there's one. Ooh, that's so nice. Crank looks good though. So we'll get this all torn down and see what we can find. Got a little bit on that rust ridge. I might have to go in there and clean some of that up. Didn't look too bad, but some of these are a little tight. That one's about to come out. There we are. Rod's a little tight. Freed up though, it's been sitting a long time. That bearing doesn't look too bad. Rings are a little stuck. Imagine that. But all in all, not terrible looking. So I'm going to toss this cap back on so we can keep it in order. I'm going to knock the rest of these pistons out, and I'll catch up with you guys in a little bit. Alright, I must say I'm impressed from the looks of those bearings. How there is no major damage on the crank. A couple little minor scratches. Most of that will probably be able to be polished out. Will be okay. Crank is spinning freely in the mains, which is nice, so nothing's bound up there. I did find that pretty much all of these rods are a little on the tight side, but then free right up. You got a lot of oil deposits and just general junk that's been sitting on these. Engine hasn't been rotated for a long time, so just get a little bit of build up there. We may end up pressing these out and cleaning them up, or just end up seeing what they're like after we spray a bit of cleaner and penetrant on them. We'll send them through the bar salt tank or parts washer tank, I'm sure. But even that one, like, that got moved back and forth 10 times, and now it's as free as could be. So I don't think we're really going to have any major issues with that. There's some of these that don't even have stuck rings. I don't know if you noticed when I was taking these pistons out, I did start orienting them in a certain order, and then I actually changed it. So I had them in order of where they were coming out from the bottom. But I would rather have it going in from the top. Again, they are marked. It's not the end of the world, but just trying to keep yourself cleaned and organized when you're taking stuff down, put it in an order on the bench of disassembly. It just helps you get less confused later on, especially if you're new to these kind of things. I will show you one of those marks. There is number 5 on the rod and the cap, so that keeps it nice and easy, and that dot indicates the front of the piston going towards the front of the engine. So see if we can get this cam out of here and get this crank out, and then we're gonna have to do some measuring. So for bearings, there's gonna be specs which I will have to look up, and I will try and link them down below for you guys in the description. But there is actually going to be a specific diameter on this rod journal, and if it is too far under, then you actually need to have the crank machine down and have an oversized bearing put in there. That is going to keep the proper tolerance so that you have the proper amount of oil in there. If you have too much gap, you will not have any oil pressure. So kind of an important thing. The amount of minor scratching that is on there should not be an issue once it gets polished to affect bearing clearances. I will show you guys a bit of a trick that I got shown by an old timer that seems to work pretty good. You may have seen it when I did the engine build with Infamous for one of his cars that went overseas. And simple, doesn't require any special tools, but you are going to have to give up a pair of shoes or find a pair of old shoelaces. So I'm going to get these popped off here, get this cam out, and then get into some measuring. None of these seem overly tight. They're all cracking loose free. Get them zipped out. And then onto cam plate removal, retainer plate removal. And then try and get that cam out. Looks a little rusty. We can polish it up, or I've got another one. Ooh. We got a good amount of orange in that thrust bearing. Some interesting wear there. Not too bad. Who knows? This thing could have a couple 100,000 miles on it. So this does actually sit down in a groove in the block. As you can see, that clean spot there. So it takes a little bit of more persuasion to get it out of there, but nothing too crazy. Crank looks okay so far. No major signs of wear. Get that rear main out of there. Tip for crankshafts, always store them vertical too. If you have them on their sides, they can develop a bit of a bow into them. So always try and store cams and cranks vertical if possible. I know a lot of old machine shops, I haven't been in any recently, but old machine shops actually had hangers, hooks to store all the crankshafts vertically to avoid having any bow start to set into them or sag while they sat in machine shops for extended periods of time. A little bit of that rust down there. All right, time for cam. Running out of parts to pull apart. Got this longer bolt. I wish I had one that was much longer, but that in the front of the cam to try and support it on removal. And if you actually spin it over, you are going to have prime access to the camshaft all through there to be able to try and support it as you're removing it from the front of the engine. You do not want that thing to be moving around a whole bunch and lobes catching the bearings, because if your cam bearings are okay, you don't want to have to replace them if you don't have to. And letting those lobes hit those cam bearings are a sure way to damage them. Alright, so we are going to give that a little bit of a pull, get it out there, and then with this longer screw or bolt out the front, you're able to support it. As I mentioned, it's flipping it upside down. You're also able to manipulate the cam a lot more, reach down in between, and you can actually help it along, especially since a couple of these lobes are quite rusty. We don't want to be hitting bearings with that, so that's not going to do it any favors. This one, I don't know, that's severely pitted. This might be going in the trash. I'll look into it a bit, but I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that because I have a perfectly good other cam that can go in here and then make things a lot easier. So I'm going to do some measuring on here. I hope you guys enjoyed part one of, I'm sure, many on this. I know it's a little longer, drawn out. Thank you guys for sticking around if you did. And I'm looking forward to seeing what we can make out of this. I'm actually noticing cross-hatching still in the cylinders where it's not rusted, so we'll get in here a little deeper, get some parts sorted up, and I will catch up with you guys next time. Thank you for watching.